Inside Out 2 is now the highest grossing animated film in history, with $1.66 billion at the box office, at least at the time of recording this. And I think this is both a good thing and a bad thing for other reasons, so I have mixed feelings here. It's a fascinating thing to talk about. Let's get into it. The biggest positive is they beat the atrocious 2019 Lion King remake, which was previously the highest grossing animated film of all time. I know it's technically the live action remake, but there's not a single live action element in that film. It's fully animated, just photorealistic animation. I am really grateful that a film that isn't creatively bankrupt now holds the title. I think the Disney live action remake trend is something that really needs to die, or at least be completely repackaged into a new form. On the other hand, Inside Out 2 being a completely original project, now holding this title, is a really great and exciting positive, outside of the fact that it might lead to some concerning tendencies for Pixar moving forward in terms of moving more into sequel territory. Some of Pixar's absolute strongest original films in years came out during the pandemic and were actually just deprived of a theatrical run, which is really unfortunate. Films like Onward were cut short, Soul didn't even get a chance, Luca didn't get a chance, Turning Red didn't get a chance, and recently, because of struggling box office returns, Disney seems to be intent on moving back towards sequel territory for surefire brands and surefire franchises that they know are going to make a lot of money at the box office. If you look at Pixar's upcoming schedule, the next 4 films that they officially have on the slate are 2 originals, Elio and Hoppers, and 2 sequels, Toy Story 5 and Incredibles 3. You know, at least we have a 50-50 projection here with originals versus sequels, but I think how those films do will really determine what their output is moving forward. But the problem is you can't just keep making sequels forever. You gotta make sequels to movies that exist in the first place. If they want to keep banking on sequels, they have to make hits that need sequels. So while I am maybe a little concerned that Pixar might fall back on those sequel tendencies, I would much rather see that than more live action remakes. I am simply not interested in any more of those. But I am a little surprised that Inside Out 2 is the one that made this much money. I know Inside Out is beloved. It doesn't feel like it demanded a sequel in almost any way. So it's a little surprising to me that Inside Out 2 of all things is the one that is just busting down the doors of the box office building. 1.6 billion so far, and probably a little more money to make in the rest of its run. I also think it's really funny how just about every year now, some films will underperform and people will collectively panic that the theaters are doomed, and then something comes out that just completely shatters those expectations and shatters those preconceptions. But we do this every year at this. People were doing it last year, and then Barbenheimer happened. Barbie made $1.5 billion. A movie about Robert Oppenheimer made nearly $1 billion. People are maybe a little more discerning, but it doesn't mean that movies can't be huge hits at the box office, and people were concerned again this year. Films like Kung Fu Panda 4 underperformed, Furiosa underperformed. A lot of things didn't do as well as expected, and yet here comes Inside Out 2, making over $1.5 billion, the highest grossing animated film in history. In fact, let's read off some stats here from Toon Hive. Inside Out 2 is the fastest animated film to gross $1 billion. It did it in just 19 days. It is the highest grossing animated film of all time, surpassing the Lion King remake. It is the 9th highest grossing film of all time. That is number 9. It is the highest grossing film of 2024 and in Pixar's history. Again, this is, I think, a positive thing since they just had some big layoffs. Hopefully this means they can kind of re-bolster their staff and not have any future layoffs with a huge hit like this. But that also has to suck. I'm sure so many people who worked on Inside Out 2 were fired and then watched the film skyrocket to this massive box office success, and they don't get to see or share in any of that success. And especially with those recent layoffs, I'm really hopeful that these new originals see some of this box office return that these sequels are getting. Elemental started off looking like it was going to be a bomb, but it actually ended up doing pretty well in the long run. It had a pretty healthy, solid run at the box office. Unfortunately, their next film, Elio, has already been delayed, and the original director and the guy who came up with the entire idea has been ousted. They've brought in more veteran directors to work on the film, so there's a little bit of a tumultuous production going on there. Hopefully it turns out okay. The film Hoppers sounds great. It's by the creator of We Bare Bears, and it's about scientists being able to put human consciousness into little robotic rabbits. It sounds silly as hell, and I love it. And then we've got, of course, Toy Story 5 and Incredibles 3, which are going to be surefire box office hits. The last two Toy Story films both made $1 billion at the box office. The Incredibles 2 made $1.2 billion, I think. They are as surefire of a hit you can get from a franchise. I am a little concerned about Toy Story 5's need to exist. They already kind of tempted fate with Toy Story 4, and that turned out to be really great. People are really mixed on Incredibles 2, but I think that world is just so rich that it really kind of demands more sequels. I've been looking forward to them doing an Incredibles 3 for a long time. I have a lot of ideas for an Incredibles 3. And the other cool thing about those two sequels, honestly, is that they're going to get Brad Bird back, allegedly, to direct Incredibles 3. And Toy Story 5 is going to be helmed by Andrew Stanton. Andrew Stanton hasn't directed a Pixar film since Finding Dory, another divisive, less beloved Pixar sequel. But Andrew Stanton obviously directed Finding Nemo and WALL-E, two of the most beloved Pixar films in history. And it's interesting to have this guy come in this late into a franchise and take over. Granted, he has had a writing credit on every single Toy Story film, so it is a franchise that he is inextricably a part of. So I kind of love him coming in, having a veteran presence in there to try and make sure that that film is as good as it needs to be for them to be tempting fate again. We needed a big animation success. Last year we had the Mario movie, which made $1.5 billion, but to see an animated film achieve this level of box office success, this is an insane amount of money. I mean, $1.6 billion is unheard of for almost anything. I guess personally, I thought Inside Out 2 was good, not great. I would have loved to see a better film achieve this success, but at the same time, it is about 45 times better than the Lion King remake that it ousted. So, you take some wins, you take some losses. Inside Out 2 is a perfectly solid film. It's a beautifully animated film. We need the theatrical experience to survive, but I hope that this is kind of proof that animated films should be really taken seriously in the box office return. Last year, the Super Mario Bros. Movie made $1.3 billion. Across the Spider-Verse made close to $700 million. This year, even though it underperformed expectations, Kung Fu Panda still made $500 million. And then Despicable Me 4, which is a film that I don't think I heard anybody talk about, made $900 million quietly at the box office, which is a slight decrease from the $1 billion that Despicable Me 3 made, as well as those Minions movies, but I mean, $900 million is obscene. Granted, almost every single movie I just listed is a sequel, except for Mario Bros., which kind of might as well be a sequel because it's a long-awaited franchise making its way to the big screen. So I guess what I would really like to see is I would just love to see the new original animated films coming out in theaters start to make decent money. I don't think we can expect them to make $1 billion, but I think we can hope for $500 to $600 million in that realm, and that's gotta be seen as a huge success for a new property. And if these studios keep looking at $500 to $600 million grosses as failures for new properties, then they're not looking at these things properly. Into the Spider-Verse is a perfect example. That film made just shy of $400 million, a relatively low gross for what you would expect from a huge hit animated movie, especially one that won an Oscar. And then its sequel, Across the Spider-Verse, made nearly $700 million. It almost doubled the gross of the first film, and I expect that Beyond the Spider-Verse will slightly increase that as well. But that's where we're at. Inside Out 2 is the highest grossing animated film in history. It is the 9th highest grossing film in history. Cinema is saved. Thank you, Inside Out. Thank you, Little Emotions, who live inside that little girl's head. What do you guys think about this? Did you guys like Inside Out 2? I thought it was fine. Let me know below in the comments. So long.
I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.